Good morning. Whoever you are, however you identify, whomever you love, wherever you may be on your own personal journey, please know that for this hour, you are part of this one gathered congregation, and you are welcome here. And welcome also for those of us joining us today on Zoom. We invite everyone here in the sanctuary to turn towards the camera and give those of us on Zoom a big wave of welcome for joining our service. My name is Michael Gardner. My pronouns are he, his, and him. I'm a worship associate in the church, and it is my privilege to be assisting the Reverend Tom Shade in the pulpit today. Reverend Shade is a retired UU minister who joined our congregation along with his friend Sue, a wife too, along with his wife Sue a few years ago. Reverend Dara has the day off. As this church formally voted several years ago, we gratefully acknowledge the Pawtuxet Wampanoag people on whose ancestral lands we gather today. We commit to support and honor their history and culture. We invite everyone to join us in coffee hour, which is reached through the door to my left, following the crowd after the postlude. If you are new, or sort of, we encourage you to use one of the red cups so other members of the congregation can be sure to meet you. This being the second Sunday of the month, we are accepting written joys and concerns this morning to be read later in the service. If you haven't done so yet, please drop off a written joy or concern here in the basket as we sing the children out or a little earlier in the service. And you may also silently light a candle, if you wish, from the chalice. A few announcements. Most immediately, there will be a Vespers service in the chapel in our garden level this Tuesday, October 14, beginning at 5:30 p.m. This service is informal and will last about a half an hour. This is the first of the monthly Vespers services that Reverend Dara plans to offer. Vespers worship is a particular favorite of her, and we on the worship committee are pleased that she is renewing a practice begun years ago during the ministry of the Reverend Robbie Walsh. Also, next Sunday evening, October the 19th, will be the first of planned monthly Sunday dinners to be held in the Assembly Hall from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. My understanding is this is not a potluck, rather the meal will be provided by the church, but look for further information about this in our upcoming Thursday UU News. Other upcoming events of note include we will be participating as members and friends of First Parish in the No Thrones, No Crowns, No Kings rally in Plymouth this coming Saturday, October 18. Those planning to attend should be at the church in time for all of us to leave together for Plymouth at noon on Saturday. There will also be an opportunity to help make signs for the rally on Friday, October 17th, here at the church between 5 and 7 p.m. And there will be pizza. Please know that next Sunday, October 19th, a photographer will be present to take candid and informal photos during worship and in coffee hour to help us tell our story to the wider community. A group photo will also be taken, so we hope as many of you in the congregation as possible can attend to participate in this and be in a historic photo. Of course, we want to respect your privacy, and if you prefer that no photos of you or your family be taken or published, please let the photographer know that directly. Two other important musical notes. FPC is co-sponsoring a concert with the nationally known group Emma's Revolution Friday, October 24th at the Kingston UU Church. You have a flyer about that in your order of service. Discounted tickets can be purchased today, I'm told, here during coffee hour. And there will be a Halloween Kele here on Sunday evening, October 26th, with more details to follow in the UU News. And a plug for that UU News, it has more information about upcoming events here at First Parish, and we encourage you to check them out. And thanks so much to Gail and David Murphy for the lovely flowers this morning.
Our opening words this morning come from David Rankin. I declare a Sabbath day to walk in the wilderness of enlarged perceptions. I declare a release from work to nourish the stamina to pursue ideals. I declare a special hour to help cherish life's joys and to combat life's sorrows. And I declare a reign of holiness to deepen our grounding in a sustaining mystery. I declare a time for simply being and letting go, for the rediscovering of great forgotten truths, for basking in the art of the ages, and for learning how to live again. Welcome. Let us worship together. And let us begin by singing hymn number 1000 in the Teal hymnal, Morning Has Come. Please rise in body or spirit.
Let this flame be to us a symbol of the wholeness we seek.
Its brightness dispelling gloom, lighting a path to faith and hope.
Its glow reminding us of the sacred bonds that link us to all living things.
Its radiance calling us to cast the light of freedom, justice, and peace upon all the world. And this is the time in our service where we send our children on their way to their own programming this morning. And today we're going to be singing them out with a song you all know, "This Little Light of Mine, I'm Going to Let It Shine." As Michael gathers the joys and sorrows. We have a concern this morning, calling for healing thoughts and prayers for my son-in-law, Glenn. Has gone in for treatment of difficulty breathing, and he's being transferred from Dover, New Hampshire to Mass General Hospital today. Thoughts also for my daughter, Debbie, too, from Linda Brookfield. And a care for the world to share from Julie and Ted Lally. A great hope for a successful hostage exchange this coming week. One more. This final candle to be lit for all the joys and concerns deeply felt, but not yet spoken. What happened to my prayer? Well, this is a little awkward, isn't it? Thank you. Let's try to get back this moment and come into a spirit of prayer and meditation. And may the presence of our ancestors be felt upon our backs, pushing us forward toward the fulfillment of all their prayers and dreams, giving us courage and strength. And may a vision of our children and our grandchildren playing, living, enjoying a world of peace and justice, compassion and equity fill us with hope and resolve. And may the presence of all of us, these witnesses to our joys and sorrows, friends who wish nothing for us but the best, friends offering helping hands and open hearts, assure us that we will not be alone in the perilous times we live in, and filling us with confidence and conviction. And may the great creating, sustaining, and transforming power, that great good intention at the heart of the universe, watch over us and guide us on the paths of love. Amen.
This reading is from Kandiaronk, a member of the Wyandot people who lived in New France from the St. Lawrence to the Upper Great Lakes. He was from the 17th and early 18th century. I spent 6 years reflecting on the state of European society, and I can't think of a single way they act that is not inhumane. And I genuinely think this can only be the case as long as you stick to your distinction between mine and thine. I affirm that what you call money is the devil of devils, the tyrant of the French, the source of all evil, the bane of souls, the slaughterhouse of the living. Money is the father of luxury, lasciviousness, intrigues, trickery, lies, betrayal, insincerity, of all the world's worst behaviors. Fathers sell their children, husbands their wives, wives betray their husbands, brothers kill each other, friends are false, and all because of money. In light of all this, tell me that we, the Wyandot, are not right in refusing to touch or so much as look at silver. If you abandon conceptions of mine and thine, distinctions among men would dissolve. A leveling equality would then take its place among you, as it now does among the Wyandot. Over and over, I have set forth the qualities that we Wyandot believe ought to define humanity: wisdom, reason, equity, etc., that demonstrated the existence of separate material interests knocks all of these in the head. Kandiaronk.
And now for the work of the church, the morning offering will be given and received. Thank you, choir. I want to start with a little observation of the death of Sir Robert Redford, the famous actor. And another observation on the health scare we had about Dame Dolly Parton, the famous singer. What? No, we don't refer to Sir Robert Redford. Ian McKellen is Sir Ian McKellen, and Maggie Smith is Dame Maggie Smith, but not Dolly Parton. We don't use these phrases because the people we're talking about are not British, of course, and because we Americans just don't do that sort of thing. In fact, our US Constitution bans US office holders from accepting any sort of title of nobility from a foreign power, which would, prevent our present president from accepting an honorary membership in the Qatari royal family. But private citizens can accept a title of nobility from a foreign prince, so theoretically, King Charles could make Dolly Parton Dame Dolly Parton if he chose, and if she would accept it. Very few Americans have ever accepted such a title, a knighthood from the British Crown. We just don't do aristocracy here. There are no kings in America. Am I right, Mary Carter? Republican ideology is in our nation's DNA, and I would call that small r republicanism, meaning anti-monarchism, anti-aristocracy, any aristocracy form of government. When Thomas Jefferson stated that all men are created equal, he was not thinking about the enslaved people he owned as being equal to him. He was declaring that commoners like himself was fully equal to the English aristocrats who governed Britain. The revolutionaries were declaring that there was not a separate, superior group of people, a sort of subspecies of humans who were meant by God and nature to rule over the rest of us. All men were created equal. It was a radical statement at the time, and we forget that because no one believes in a hereditary aristocracy anymore. Every European society in 1776 was ruled by an aristocracy. And yes, England had the experience of the Cromwell regime during the Civil War, but that ended badly. And it really didn't challenge the existence of an aristocracy, just royalty. So the question is, where did this Republican idea come from? This idea that all people are created equal. Why did the idea of equality of all people, men only of course, develop in Europe or in America? Europe was a profoundly unequal society, a society that was ruled by an aristocracy which was itself divided into ranks, princes and dukes and earls and marquis and viscounts, all rigidly ranked and ordered. They could not sit down to a meal together without sorting themselves according to their ranking. You've all seen Bridgerton, which I guess is not a documentary, but you still get the idea. And even among the so-called common people, there were rankings. There were landowners and householders and tenants and farmers and laborers and beggars and thieves. And yet out of this rigidly stratified European culture comes the ideas of the equality of people, and eventually the equality of all people, universal human rights, and now the so-called woke mind virus, which tries to make real a beloved community, the very opposite the very opposite of where European society was in 1776. Now, there are defenders of what they call the Western tradition that say that egalitarianism and individualism and universalism are the essence of the Western European tradition, when for centuries the European tradition was marked by the divine right of kings, feudalism, and the all-powerful hierarchical church. So what happened? Why did such a rigidly stratified society give birth to the idea that all people are equal? Historians sometimes credit the Protestant Reformation with its assertion that all people have their own relationship to God and can learn the truth about their salvation on their own by reading the Bible. And historians also credit the printing press, Gutenberg's printing press, which made the Bible available to all. And other historians point to the humanist tradition in the Renaissance with its emphasis on learning and reading and the rediscovery of all the ancient classics. What I wish to talk about today and communicate in today's sermon is an assertion made by some recent anthropologists and historians that say that the seeds of the transformation of European society, the transformation of the Western tradition into an egalitarian tradition, came from the critiques of indigenous people of European society. I came across this idea in a book by the anthropologist and archaeologist David Graeber and David Wengrow called The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. It's a bold book. New York Times says it takes as its, quote, immodest goal nothing less than upending everything that we think about the origins and evolution of human society, which has everything to do with how we think about indigenous people today. Which is why I was eager to accept the invitation to lead worship on today, Indigenous Peoples Weekend, when it came from the worship committee and Reverend Dara. Professors Graeber and Wengrow tell us that indigenous thinkers were far more present in the 17th European intellectual life than has been thought. And the writer Kandiaronk, who is the source of our reading today, was one such writer. He was a leader of the Wendat, which is a confederation of Iroquoian-speaking nations who live in what is now Canada and upstate New York. People who had extensive commercial relations with the French, fur traders, and Jesuit missionaries. Kandiaronk wrote and spoke French and closely collaborated with a French official with a long name, now shortened to La Hontan. Kandiaronk may have actually lived in France for a while. And he and La Hontan published a book of dialogues between them in which they compared and contrasted Wendat and French society, governance, and culture. And Kandiaronk is merciless in his critique of the French. The French are not free, he says. They work all day, every day. They are ruled by their betters, and ultimately they are ruled by the whims of one man, the king, the one who has authority over everybody. The Wendat, on the other hand, lead lives of comparative leisure, surrounded as they are by the bounty of nature. And yes, they have chiefs whom they elect and depose at will, and who do not actually have the power to command them, except in certain circumstances. And yes, they have wealth in the form of valued objects, but that wealth does not turn into power over others. They had, what we would, consider jewelry or decorative items, but you couldn't take that decorative item and to another person and say, now I'll give you this if you work for me. That just didn't happen. And Kandiaronk heaps scorn, especially on Christianity, especially with its all-powerful universal God, who somehow still needed missionaries to tell of himself the world over. Kandiaronk was just one of the indigenous writers and thinkers whose critiques of European society were circulated among European intellectuals. It is probable that Rousseau read La Hontan's work, and it was what we would call now a bestseller. And you can see the influence of indigenous thinking in Rousseau's famous dictum that man was born free and yet is everywhere in chains. When you think about it, the colonization of North America must have been an enormous intellectual challenge to Europe. Here, they thought that the way that European society was structured was the way that things had to be, that the way they lived was ordained by God. And then they come in contact with a continent filled with people who lived in completely different ways and in a huge variety of ways. It must have set off cognitive dissonance, that disequilibrium that comes when new facts upset what you thought was settled and true. And when you're in a state of cognitive dissonance, you search for an explanation that allows you to incorporate new facts, the new facts you're confronted with, into your old worldview. Here's a little contemporary example. You know, if you think that Donald Trump is immensely popular and won the election in 2020 by a landslide, and then you find out that millions of people are demonstrating against him, it sets off cognitive dissonance. And so you have to come up with an explanation for why this is. Well, maybe they're being paid, right? Maybe they just hate America. Maybe they're working for Hamas. That's just an example. So when Europeans were confronted by the fact that whole cultures and nations on the North American continent lived in a completely different way than they did, they had to find an explanation for why this was. The church gave them one explanation, that they were heathens and did not know God's plan for humanity, and so they did not live according to God's ordinances. But ultimately, European intellectuals fell upon another explanation, that the indigenous were primitive. They were remnants of how people lived at an earlier stage of social development. They're not really of this world. They're remnants of a previous world that is vanishing. They should be in the Smithsonian and not in the Senate. Graeber and Wengrow suggest by seeing indigenous people as remnants rather than contemporaries, Europeans distorted much of anthropology for centuries to come. So now we come to the so what. Every sermon has to have a so what, right? What does all this talk about a forgotten dialogue between European and indigenous intellectuals centuries ago have to do with us? There are two answers to this question, and the first is suggested by the title of the sermon. We do a land acknowledgement to the Patuxet and Wampanoag people every service today, and I have to commend you as a congregation with your history, right, in this place, for you to take seriously a land acknowledgement to the people who own this land before the Europeans come. That's good work. That's good work. It needs to be done, to be here and to do it. Right? But we should be acknowledging more than just the land, because some of the ideas that are absolutely central to our way of faith, the respect for each individual's person's worth and dignity, their fundamental equality, our universalism, we got in part from indigenous thinkers. Think on that. This faith was formed in part by the indigenous people who raised the critiques of European society back at the time of colonization. The other so what is this. It's about the perils of finding easy answers to situations of cognitive dissonance. Where are we being confronted with new facts that don't fit into our mental systems? And what do we do when we find ourselves in that situation? Let me offer an example. Most of us grew up with a simple and sturdy system of thinking about gender. There were boys and there were girls, and everyone was one or the other, and was so from before they were born. And now we're confronted with new facts, not new ideas. Yet the difference between a fact and an idea. We're confronted by new facts in the form of people who tell us, my life isn't that way at all. My life doesn't fit into your mental system. So what are you going to do about that? Well, you can either try to explain them away, or you can change the way you think. Kandiaronk showed up in the Paris Salon and by his presence confronted the French intellectuals at the fact of his life and his people's lives. He was saying you must either see us as real or change the way you think, or you can try to explain us away. Maybe say that we're relics of an earlier time. Trans people show up to us and say, either you have to see us as real, or you can try to explain us away. Oh, they're mentally ill, or they're trying to fool us, or they're trying to sneak into the other bathroom. Neurodiverse people show up with the facts of their life, and they say, either see us or explain us away. Oh, they're just retarded. Homeless people, either we confront the fact of their life says that we don't have enough houses for people to live in, or we explain them away. Oh, they're mentally ill, they're drug addicts, they like it out there in the street. Disabled people, the same thing. The world shows up to us in the reality of people who challenge so much of the way that we think. And this church, this religious tradition, through all this long 400-year history we have has come to the place where it aspires to be a learning community where people learn to turn away from the path of explaining away people and toward the path of seeing people as real, and that their lives are real, and when they challenge the way that we think, we do the work of rethinking. It exists to turn us to the path of seeing people, recognizing people, and to take the path guided by love. Amen. Let's sing our hymn number 318. We Would Be One. Y'all know this one, I'm sure. Join in our chalice extinguishing.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
And my friends, I remind you once again that there are great powers at work in the universe, powers that are creating and sustaining and transforming lives. And you can trust that power. It will be with you whenever you stand up for justice. It will be with you whenever you reach out to someone who needs a friend. It will be with you whenever you give your life over to love. So trust in that power and go forth from this congregation and this morning and this hour filled with confidence and hope, and do the work of this church in the world. Amen.